To order. Today's Friday, and this is the 26th meeting du Sous-Comité des droits internationaux de la personne. This in hybrid format, in conformity with the House Order of the 23rd of June, 2022. I have just some comments for the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you before speaking. For the witnesses, you'll have 5 minutes each to give your introductory remarks, and then we're going to have a series of questions and answers. Just look to me for, I'll give you a signal once, a minute is reached, and then 30 seconds. Minute, I'll just go like this, 30 seconds like that, and then I'll lean in to close those comments. On a interpretation par Zoom.
We have Zoom interpretation.
Your screen on the globe. For those witnesses who are here, you can choose English, French, or the original uninterpreted language. Donc, aujourd'hui.
So today, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on September 23rd, 2022.
The rights and freedoms of women in Afghanistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. And as individuals, we have Kiev Sharoz, lawyer and senior fellow at Macdonald-Laurier Institute. We have also from the Equity Fund, Beatrice Gonzalez Manchon. I hope I pronounced that right. Co-president of Global Programs. And also for women living under Muslim laws, Huma Hudfar, professor of anthropology by Zoom. So we're going to start with those in the room. Mr. Sharoz, please, for 5 minutes.
I want to begin by thanking the esteemed members of this subcommittee for providing me the opportunity to meet with you today in the wake of International Women's Day, in this session about the rights and freedoms of women in Afghanistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. I will focus my remarks on the issue of women in Iran. As you are well aware, Iranians are in the throes of a national uprising against the theocratic regime that has ruled their country for 4 decades. Sparked by the killing of a young woman for improper hijab, the protests have become revolutionary in nature, calling for death to the dictator and death to the Islamic Republic. Most importantly, the protesters have been chanting a slogan which, in its very first word, proves that the rights of women are at the forefront of this uprising. Woman, life, freedom serves both as a revolutionary chant and as a manifesto of what the protesters want. In response to this revolutionary moment, Iran's regime has resorted to the only play in its playbook, unleashing brutality, often deployed on a gendered basis, to silence critics. After attacking peaceful protesters on the streets and beating them savagely, Iran's regime detained thousands and threatened them with execution. The Iranian Justice Collective, a group of activists that I'm proud to be a part of, has been able to carefully document approximately 3,600 detentions. The actual number is likely many times that. The regime has, as reported by CNN and other outlets, regularly used sexual assault as a tool to intimidate detainees. And in recent weeks, this regime, or a shadowy organization closely affiliated with it, has been the likely culprit behind a horrific campaign of chemically poisoning thousands of schoolgirls. Again, the Iranian Justice Collective has carefully documented 630 chemical attacks at 388 schools. The message of such poisoning is not difficult to decipher. If you stand up to our misogyny, as so many brave schoolgirls have done in recent months, if you stand up to our misogyny, we will stop at nothing to destroy you. The chemical attacks are also a reminder that the Islamic regime in Iran, much like the Taliban, which have used this tactic repeatedly, views the education of girls as a serious threat to its power. It's important to remember, of course, that the horrific misogyny that the world has seen from Iran's regime in recent months is not a new phenomenon. It's written into the very DNA of this theocracy. Reciting the history of this regime's misogynistic policies and crimes will take more time than we have today. I will simply point out that among the first actions of the Islamic Republic were to remove women from many professions, segregate many parts of public life along gender lines, and impose the hijab on women, often at gunpoint or by throwing acid in the faces of women who did not comply. In fact, perhaps the first to stand up to the Islamic regime were Iran's women, who in massive International Women's Day marches in 1979 opposed the erosion of their rights. Those protests and many other acts of courageous defiance by women were met with violence. Alas, that violence ultimately succeeded in turning Iran's women into second-class citizens, both de jure and de facto. An Iranian woman is not permitted to travel without permission from her father or husband. In Iran, polygamy for men is permitted, as is the marriage of very young girls. According to Iran Wire, which is an investigative news site, Iran's Civil Registration Organization's 2021 annual report showed that in the previous 8 years, over 13,000 marriages of girls under the age of 13 had been registered. In Iran, a woman is not permitted to sing a solo or ride a bike in public. Women cannot enter stadiums to watch the national soccer team play. A daughter's share of inheritance is half that of her brother's. A woman's testimony in court is worth half that of a man. And when it comes to restitution for murder, a woman's life is literally valued at half that of a man in Iran's criminal code. I could go on with 100 other ways, large and small, that Iran's regime dehumanizes women on a daily basis. All those facts point to one conclusion about which we should not mince words. For over 4 decades, Iran has been a gender apartheid state. The question then is, what should Canada do? I believe the most valuable thing our government can do is very simple, but from it will flow a host of other policies. Our government must recognize the obvious truth that I stated just a moment ago, that the Islamic Republic in Iran is an apartheid state and that we should treat it as such. Even though the gender apartheid system in Iran is 4 decades old, successive Canadian governments have looked the other way for a variety of reasons, sometimes for commercial reasons, but more often out of the well-entrenched, but in my opinion, misguided view that dialogue and engagement will always lead to improvements in the behavior of rogue states. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, does that mean my time is up, or?
You can give concluding words.
I urge you to recognize that just as Canada led the way in convincing our allies around the world to cut ties with the apartheid regime in South Africa, we must lead other democracies in isolating Iran's regime. This means listing the IRGC. This means telling our allies that diplomatic agreements with this regime, like the JCPOA, are a betrayal of Iran's women. We should open our doors to large numbers of Iranian activists, many of them women's rights activists, currently languishing in Iran or in nearby countries like Turkey and Iraq. And we should, in turn, close our doors to officials and affiliates of the regime who wish to bring their funds and families here. In 1988, Nelson Mandela spoke to our House of Commons and expressed his gratitude to this country, saying, "Thank you for helping us end our oppression." We deserve that gratitude then for having stood up against racial apartheid in South Africa, and we should earn similar gratitude again for standing up against gender apartheid in Iran. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shiroz. And now we'll continue for 5 minutes to Ms. Machon. Please, go ahead.
Hello. Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good day, all.
As a fund created to resource women's rights organizations and human rights defenders, we hear from activists and their experiences every day. Here is but one recent example. Dear sisters, my colleagues and I are speaking to the lawyers and are working towards resolving the situation. We had campaigned for years to get legislation to stop trafficking of women in Iraq, and it was approved in 2012. Now, the extremists in power are using this same legislation against us to stop us from sheltering women and to attempt to humiliate us as criminals. Criminalization, attacks, harassment, cyberbullying, imprisonment, and violence against women's rights and LGBTQI defenders are unfortunately on the rise in many parts of the world. I congratulate the subcommittee on the important and timely study and thank you for the opportunity to appear on the heels of International Women's Day. I represent the Equality Fund, a Canadian-based women's fund that supports women's rights organizations and feminist funds in the global South and East, like the organization from Iraq whose message I just shared. We received a $300 million contribution from Global Affairs Canada in 2019. At present, Equality Fund resources are flowing to over 300 women's rights organizations and LGBTQI groups in about 85 countries. In my brief time, I'd like to make 2 observations and leave the subcommittee with 5 recommendations. First, I'd like to build on the testimony of other witnesses. Women's rights and LGBTQI activists in Afghanistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere are on the front lines, pushing back against authoritarian regimes and pay a huge price. We see this pattern of anti-gender ideologies and backlash against women's rights in many places, whether in the US on reproductive rights or the Philippines, Nicaragua, and Sri Lanka. Second, against this backdrop, I would like to lift up the need for networks, connections, and collaborative work that was mentioned by other speakers who have testified here. Following the fall of Kabul in 2021, Equality Fund collaborated with allies to better support brave activists. In the case of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we coordinated to resource women's funds based in Ukraine and neighboring countries to support women and non-binary people as they fled their homes. Here's what we've learned. Long-term support to women's rights movements is absolutely key. Strong, well-supported movements enable effective responses when crises hit and regimes crack down. The protests we are seeing in Iran, for example, are possible because of decades of organizing and resistance by the movements. This didn't just happen overnight. Investments overall in these efforts are incredibly underfunded. This is in sharp contrast to the money being mobilized to attack the rights of women and non-binary people. According to the Global Philanthropy Project, between 2008 and 2017, 11 American organizations associated with the anti-gender movement channeled at least $1 billion to countries across the globe. Finally, we have to listen to activists when they say that collective care and protection are inseparable. Defenders require urgent assistance when they are in immediate danger, but in addition, investments in support structures, long-term health, community-based strategies as defined by the activists themselves are essential. Here are our recommendations. First, release the long-promised feminist foreign policy paper and ensure that there are the resources and support to ensure its successful implementation. Second, with the Feminist International Assistance Policy, Global Affairs Canada has taken steps to resource feminist movements. As the Peace and Security Ambassador told this committee last year, more can be done. Review the effectiveness of the Voices at Risk guidelines. As this subcommittee has heard, these commitments are intended to guide how Canadian diplomats support human rights defenders around the world. It is time to assess whether or not the guidelines meet this urgent moment or bolder measures are needed. Increase the number of human rights defenders admitted under the newly established immigration stream. At the very minimum, Canada could expand this key program so that 250 is the number of defenders alone, not counting the people and family members who arrive with them. And fifth, increased support for women human rights defenders once they arrive in Canada is urgently needed. The vast majority want to continue their advocacy in their home country, but are hindered by the absence of resources to connect, strategize, and continue their important work. We also support the numerous recommendations presented to this committee on Afghanistan, including amending Canada's anti-terrorism legislation to enable Canadian organizations to support women's rights activists in Afghanistan and other countries with similar contexts. The exemptions presented yesterday are a step in the right direction, and we are looking forward to learning more. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you today, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Machon. And we'll now continue on to Ms. Hoodfar by Zoom, please. Just have to, perfect. Go ahead.
Thank you for inviting me to appear in this in front of this committee. I would like to start by saying, as a Canadian Iranian, I spent my early years of education and life in Iran. After I left, I focused and devoted my studies and education and public engagement, looking at the situation, an obstacle, ideological, cultural, and legal obstacle that women face, and impact of that on their lives in the MENA region. Today, I would like to draw attention to situation in Afghanistan and in Iran very briefly. Of course, I'm grateful that some of our other presenters actually covered some of the issues that I wanted to cover. But I also continue to say in Afghanistan, after women loss of rights and the most basic aspect of their lives, but going to school, walking in the neighborhood, going to work, has really unleashed misery on the nation. At least estimated 3 million girls are now out of schools, and with the Taliban banning the primary after primary schools, and also now has extended to the university. These numbers have, of course, increased. What has happened in effect, the Taliban have taken education of girls and women as a hostage in order to leverage in their conversation and negotiation with the West. And that's a very important aspect that often is ignored in a lot of discussion. The problem that the problem is that even when we open the school, society will face another set of problems as the Taliban are increasingly using a school and educational system as a platform to spread their extreme ideology. Under this situation, the international community has to stop by just issuing sympathetic statement, but also enter into really taking action that makes a difference on the ground and contract some of the negative impact of what Taliban are doing. In the reality is Taliban are not only a problem for Afghanistan, and I want to insist this, especially observing what is in the region. If their ideology of Taliban is not checked, it will spill over in the neighboring countries, and finally it will also affect the West. As we saw, the training of the extremists and calling them freedom fighter finally ended up in the tragedy of 9/11. Today, our world are not so segregated that we are not affected by what is happening elsewhere. We are calling upon Canada to adopt a foreign policy to put human rights at the center and make education, in particular, a centerpiece of that policies. Having a feminist foreign policy and feminist international assistance policy that does not actually foster and protect basic human rights of women is like expecting a bird to fly with one wing. There are possibilities and ways that the impact of Taliban's attack on, especially on education, can be counteracted. And there are people who have done research, which I'm happy to share later on some of the strategies, because these needs, while a lot of Afghan refugees outside have taken steps to support them, but these needs really large scale strategic analysis. I also want to not go back to draw your attention to the situation in Iran, again on education of girls in Iran. As it was mentioned, there has been large impact of this gas attack on schoolgirls, which a lot of the civil society there have actually asked for us to condemn internationally, ask for independent research and investigation in that is done by entities such as UNICEF, WHO, and UNESCO, because there's no trust between in the investigation in Iran, given that the moral compass of Iranian regime is very doubtful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoodfar. And now we're going to go on to a series of questions and answers, starting with Mr. Virsen for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Ms. Hoodfar, I'd like to start with you. Just around, you mentioned around basically we have to work simultaneously, you said about asking a bird to fly with one wing. Can you just like clarify that once again? The two, how we have to work hand in hand to defend human rights around the world.
Well, that's so. For instance, looking at international feminist international assistance, I look a lot of time we support women's at the local level in terms of economic independence, but we don't make priorities about their human rights. Even if women are skilled and can earn money, but do not have human rights, then they can't really achieve their potential. So I think when I said it's just flying in one wing, is that we have to balance our support for human rights, basic human rights we're talking about, and supporting economic development. And I worry that sometimes economic development, because it's easier, because you can see the result maybe faster, it gets priority. That's what I meant, that we need to really focus on human rights and economic development at the same time.
Mr. Shahrouz, just wondering if you could outline a little bit more around the poisonings that have been happening in Iran, and do you have a clear recommendation for what the government of Canada can do on that?
Excellent question. The foreign minister has already condemned it in unequivocal terms, which is a great first step. But I think, as Ms. Hoodfar was saying, I don't think we can trust the Iranian regime itself to investigate these chemical attacks where the regime is likely the perpetrator, or a group very closely tied to the regime is the perpetrator. So it's really our role to push international agencies, the UN perhaps, to conduct an investigation. There already is a UN Human Rights Council independent investigation into the human rights situation in Iran. That's something we ought to be supporting. But as I said, I mean, this is one manifestation of a deeper misogynistic ideology and a 4-decade-long gender apartheid system. I think we ought to abandon a mindset that has governed us for too long, saying that we can have a dialogue with this regime. A regime that poisons schoolgirls is not one that you can have negotiations with. We ought to abandon any illusion about negotiating with the regime that's in power in Iran and support Iran's revolution. That's really the only way in which attacks of this nature, heinous acts of this nature, will ultimately end.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Hoodfar, if you could, this study that we're undertaking, it also talks about Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure if you have any expertise in that area as well. One of the issues that comes to my attention regularly is just around how the participation in the realm of human trafficking happens in Saudi Arabia. So many household staff are they're considered to be employees by Western nations, and yet often are enslaved in Saudi Arabia. Do you have any expertise or opinions or clarifications on that and what that looks like in Saudi Arabia?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have much expertise in that, but I know at Women Living Under Muslim Laws, the question of trafficking, especially in the Saudi Arabian Gulf, under the name of domestic worker is actually very widespread, and we frequently get complaints by women who have gone there under that name, and then they found themselves in this kind of situation. So I wish I could say more, but since it's not area of my research, I stop here.
Okay. Mr. Shahrouz, do you have any comments or expertise in that as well?
Not uniquely on the issue of Saudi Arabia. I apologize.
Okay. Beatrice?
Yes. So one of the organizations that the Equality Fund is supporting is the Global Alliance Against Trafficking in Women. And so they have really valuable research and publications on how these patterns of trafficking in women happen in many regions of the world, and how that sometimes can be for the purpose of sexual exploitation, for the purpose of domestic work, how that trafficking actually intersects with labor rights. And I would be very happy to send more information to this committee on some of their research on trafficking.
Thank you.
Do you have?
We just about hit 6 minutes right now. But thank you, Mr.
sir.
Virson. And we're going to continue for the next round to Mr. Assassi for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Allow me also to thank all three of the witnesses for their excellent testimony. Now, if I could start off with Mr. Shahrouz. Your testimony was truly compelling. But the first question I had for you is this morning, we all woke up to the news that China has now brokered a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Could you share with us what you think the implications of this agreement will be for human rights, in particular in Iran?
That's a very good question, MP Assassi. With the caveat that I've only seen very preliminary news reports and haven't had time to digest it very much yet. My instinct that this is actually bad news for human rights in Iran for a variety of reasons, primarily because it gives a further lifeline to the Islamic regime in Tehran, and it removes a particular sort of threat. This regional rivalry with Saudi Arabia was a particular threat to the Islamic regime. So the Iranian regime will likely be empowered as a result of it. And furthermore, Iran will be further empowered by the fact that China now seems to be fully in the camp of supporting Iran's regime. So anything that normalizes that regime, anything that stabilizes that regime further and gets it out of the moment of crisis that it's been in for the past few months, I think is bad news for Iran's people and the human rights movement generally. My recommendation to the subcommittee and to the government would be for us not to take our eye off the ball. Iran's regime remains an apartheid regime, and we ought to continue to treat it as such, even if it creates alliances with those in its neighborhood. We ought to remain committed to helping Iranian people and Iranian women in particular. So I urge you, even if Iran gains allies in the region, Canada should remain steadfast in its support of Iranian people.
Thank you. Now, my second question, Mr. Shahrouz, is quite often I hear here in Canada that people labor under the illusion that the Iranian community in Canada is fragmented. There are some who like the regime and some who don't. Given your extensive activities in the Iranian Canadian community, what is your sense of the popularity of the regime amongst Iranian Canadians? And also, I understand there was a new poll of Iranians within Iran. How do Iranians within the country view this odious regime?
I think you're asking a really critical question, and the reason I say that is because there is regrettably a narrative that has taken hold in the West, in the Western media, that there is a real divide in the community. Some people support the regime, some people are opposed to it. The truth of the matter is, I struggle to find anyone in the community, and I'm very involved in the community, and as are you, MP Assassi, that supports this regime. Obviously, there are going to be people that have ties to that regime. Regrettably, they have found their way to Canada, so they may have sympathies for the regime, or they may even, in fact, be representatives of the regime here in secret. But by and large, the Iranian people in the diaspora despise this regime. They want it gone. There have been protests in recent months that have drawn tens of thousands of people here in Canada. In the town of Richmond Hill, we had a protest where 50,000 people came out. That was the police estimate. You don't get 50,000 Canadians coming out for very many things, but we had 50,000 people coming out saying that they reject the Islamic Republic. Similarly, the poll that you cited is a good poll, and it points to the fact that Iranian people inside the country in very large numbers, I forget the exact number, something around 80% or so, I think, want this regime gone. This regime really has no base of support inside or outside the country.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Chavez. I completely agree with you. Now, if I could go to Dr. Hoodfar. Dr. Hoodfar, thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Hoodfar, you restricted your comments to Iran and Afghanistan and how difficult it has been on women, how systematic these impediments have been for women. I was wondering if you could also comment on the regrettable brain drain that both these countries are suffering from. How big a phenomenon is that? And what can the world do to make sure that the human resources that are leaving these two countries are put to good use?
Well, this, in fact, is very regrettable, especially in the context of Afghanistan. In the context of Iran, the large number have left, but they have kept in touch, and there are also quite a few people inside the country, and that has helped. Many people, many Iranian hope if the regime change, they can go back and be at the service of the country, even if they don't necessarily want to completely move back to Iran. But in the case of Afghanistan, the situation is a little bit more dire, and the fact is the whole takeover by Taliban was a surprise, and many of the elite have left, and those who have left in the country do not have yet. They are still in shock. So one of the major issues is that we bring the other people, the experts, the politicians who are outside, manage to bring them together to form that alliance, have the summits, have a program, really work like a nation outside the boundaries of the country. My worry has been that there's not enough step taken to bring people together, have those summits, make larger and smaller groups that are connected and work. And the same is with the education, that education system, we really need to establish like an education system, like a country or education system for the country outside the border of that country, if we want to save Afghanistan from the strategy of ideology of Taliban, which will spill over to the neighboring and to the other countries.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hoodfar and Mr. Assassi. We're going to continue on to our next round. Mr.
Duceppe, you have 6 minutes. Mr. Brunel Duceppe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. I don't have much time. Mr. Assassi, my colleague, asked an interesting question regarding the regime and its position. Mr. Chavez, you said that most Iranians in the diaspora stand against this regime. I think we agree on that. But has there not been an increase in opposition against the regime? Are there no other entities within the opposition in the regime that don't help in some way Canada's position, taking a strong position against Iran in this regard? I'm wondering if you could clarify that. I've been approached, actually, by a number of opponents to the regime who may not have the same vision of things as to the future of Iran if the regime were to fall.
I regret that the simultaneous translation seemed to cut off, so I didn't catch the end of your question. But sorry.
Okay, but
Mr. Chair, can we give me my 6 minutes back? Okay, so I'll get my time back. All right, great. It happens.
Pas entendu la question.
The witness did not hear the question. Perhaps you can ask it once again. So, yes, so I will. Thank you to all witnesses for being here for this important study. Mr. Chavez, Mr. Assassi asked you some interesting questions as to the opposition within the diaspora against the regime. And I fully agree with you that the vast majority of the diaspora is opposed to the regime in Iran. But I've been approached by a number of opposition movements, and that's where people are wondering, is there some fragmentation there? There seem to be diverging views as to what the regime or what Iran should look like following the fall of the regime, let's say. So it's difficult then for a country to take a position on one or the other. Please enlighten us.
That's really an excellent question. So there is a difference in view in the diaspora in terms of what Iran should look like, what its orientation should be in terms of should it be a more sort of left-leaning country, right-leaning country. And among any group of people, any nation, there will be people who have different politics. But I've, quite frankly, never seen this level of unity in the diaspora in the core idea that the Islamic regime must go. And this spans everything from the far left of the Iranian community to the far right. I think they're all united on that. And I would also say that this chant that I cited in my testimony, "Woman, Life, Freedom," has been sort of the glue that holds the different views of the diaspora together. This is a commitment to women's rights and a rejection of the patriarchy of the Islamic Republic, life. And a celebration of life and a rejection of the cult of death and the executions and the degradation of life by the Islamic Republic, and freedom. I think that speaks for itself. I think the entire diaspora or the vast majority of the diaspora are united on that. And what that tells me is that their vision of a future Iran is a democratic one. It's a pluralistic one. It's one that respects women. There are going to be political disputes, as there will be in any country. But I think the opposition is united on a commitment to democracy and women's rights.
Merci.
Thank you so much for this response. Professor Hoodfar, I've also been in touch with some minority groups that are either within Iran or Afghanistan. I'm thinking of the Kurdish community, but also the Azaris in Afghanistan. Given the situation for women in these countries already being horrid, is it not even worse for those minorities, whether it's an ethnic or religious minority? And if you could draw a picture of the situation for women that are parts of these minority groups, that would be appreciated by the committee.
Thank you for this question. This is actually has been the movement of Women, Life, Freedom is started from Kurdish area and has brought, because it is started from the margin, has brought those voices that usually they are omitted from from voices in the center. So this time, actually, this movement has brought people together and have given a voice. For instance, for the first time amongst the movement, you hear from Baluchi women, from the Kurdish women, and they have now a space that historically have never had. And that, to me, is a very major. But the situation of Hazara in the context of Afghanistan, unfortunately, is not as bright as I can see. There's a lot of still attack, especially for Hazaras inside the Afghanistan by Taliban because of the religious minority as well as being racial minority, and that is really needs attention of international community. And so they live in a gender apartheid society, but especially then they're also prosecuted for being Hazara and being a Shia minority. So unfortunately, that's one of the saddest situation in Afghanistan for Hazaras who's left behind.
Merci.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from Ms. Manchon on this point. Can she draw a picture of the situation for the Azaris, for the Azar women in Afghanistan? Does she have that expertise or not?
Pas nécessaire.
Not necessarily on that ethnic minority, but I thank you for the question. But clearly, whenever we discuss human rights, there is some intersectionality. And when you're dealing with oppressive regimes, ideologies like those we're discussing here, clearly there are various aspects of discrimination, and I would imagine that is also happening in Afghanistan with the ethnic minorities. Same thing with Myanmar, Iraq, other countries of the sort. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chahrouz, the events that have happened against these schoolgirls in Iran, to some, have been viewed as a type of vengeance or some kind of revenge from the authorities. It's simply out of a desire to send out a signal and issue some revenge that these girls were targeted.
20 seconds, please.
Oops, désolé.
Sorry.
Sorry, I always lose the tail end of the question, but yeah, sorry.
À ce moment-là, est-ce
Do you think it's out of a desire for revenge that the regime targeted schoolgirls? And is it also sending a signal to the rest of the people of Iran as to what's coming?
I'm sorry, for whatever reason, this doesn't seem to be working, but I think I understood the thrust of the question. This does seem to be born out of a desire for vengeance, for punishing these schoolgirls. The schoolgirls, you must understand, girls as young as 10 were seen protesting in large numbers against this regime. And this regime's modus operandi has been to target precisely the people that are standing up against them. So, for example, the working class rose up against the regime, and two of the people that this regime executed very publicly were working class young men to send a message to the working class to go back home and stop protesting. These chemical attacks against schoolgirls seems also to be in that vein. It seems to be designed to send a message to these girls that if you come out again, if you push back against the government, if you join these protests, you will be punished, and we are going to target the very thing that empowers you, which is your education.
Thank you, Mr. Chahrouz, et merci, Monsieur Brunel-Duceppe. On va continuer.
Thank you, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe.
avant de
Mr. Chair, before we continue, I'd like us to address this problem. This is an important matter, but I'd like us to address the technical problem there before we move to the next round.
With that, is there? We're going to monitor this and fix it. We're going to continue for the next 6 minutes with Ms. McPherson.
Non, Monsieur le Président, excusez-moi.
No, I'm sorry. Point of order. Point of order. I would like us to address the problem, not that we continue and then solve the problem, but that we solve the problem first.
Okay.
Mr. Brunel-Duceppe, could you please continue speaking so that we can test the interpretation? Yes, certainly I can do that. I can also tell you a fable or something else. I can tell you a tale of all sorts. Is that working? It seems to be solved. Thank you.
I just wanted to say it's been working fine on our side, the staff as well.
Okay, great. So we're going to continue. I'm happy that it's taken care of. We don't want to take away from the testimony. So let's get into it. Ms. McPherson, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. I wish I could be with you in person today as we talk about this very important issue. Obviously, we are seeing a gender apartheid happening in Iran. We are I represent Edmonton Strathcona, where there were many victims from PS 752 resided. But I wanted to start by taking a moment to say something about the Iranian Canadians and the Iranian community outside of Iran that has been just so incredible in fighting for the rights of Iranian women. The protests, the constant bringing this forward, I think, has been why we're studying it here, why this issue has become so important to so many people across the country. So thank you to everyone who's participated in that movement. But as a Foreign Affairs Committee, as a subcommittee of the Foreign Affairs, our goal now is to look at what Canada can do, what those things Canada can do to help the women of Iran, the people of Iran, deal with their murderous regime. So I know Miss Gonzalez Manchon, you spoke about the feminist foreign policy. This is a huge issue, something that I've raised many, many times. We've been told by the government that they in fact have in effect a feminist foreign policy, but that it is not written down, it is not public, it is not something that is shared. How important is it that this feminist foreign policy actually be articulated, actually be written down, and actually be shared with Canadians and with people around the world?
For that question, I would say that is extremely important. We lifted that up in our first recommendation here, that the feminist foreign policy has to be published and shared, and it has to have a coherence and a articulation of all of the different tools and policies that can also make a difference in its implementation. As one of the witnesses was saying here today, Professor, thank you for that comment. There has to be a coherence between what our international assistance does and what our foreign policy does. It's all part and parcel of achieving the goals that we have, and supporting the groups around the world that are doing this work. So it's extremely important that it be published, that it be shared, and that it has all of the tools that can bring that coherence and action.
Thank you. Well, and I think also what it does is it provides leadership for other countries, for them to consider having a feminist foreign policy. Also, I really appreciate what you said about the idea that our development and our foreign policy must be aligned. In fact, I think our international development is a fundamental pillar of our foreign policy that needs to be used when we look at our defense, our peace and security, our diplomacy. Ms. Hoodfar, could you please comment on that as well, and perhaps talk a little bit about the need for the support, the funding, whatnot, to be to align with a feminist foreign policy. So what it means to actually have predictable, long-term, flexible funding included in that.
Well, that's actually quite important. Thank you for bringing that to the discussion, because a lot of time you get a project with 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. These 4 years project is not going to deliver very much in terms of human rights. You have to have at least a 20 years policy that then, you dish it out in a smaller, but in a coherent way, so that we see the result at the end. So those are very important. And also combining economic support with human rights issues, especially the right of minorities, whether it's sexual minorities, religious minorities, racial minorities. Those are very important issues, because those tend to be in different countries are the most excluded group of people. If you can protect their human rights, you basically have to protect everybody else's human rights. And I think often, not just in Canada, but elsewhere, in the development project, we separate the human right as politics and then development as economic development, while these two should be hand in hand, and they work together better if they are combined and incoherent with one another. And that's what we really wish to see in Canada, to set an example for the rest of the at least the feminist governments.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, you talk about the difference between having our human rights in one sort of bowl and our development in another bowl. What I found is that we also have our trade in a different bowl, and unfortunately, we often prioritize trade over these other things like human rights and like our international development. Perhaps you could just comment a little bit on that.
Within 30 seconds.
Well, as I said, the combination of these all together, these are not and I use that expression of the birds, because unless we get them together, we don't really reach the result we want to have. And so I hope we can come together and coordinate these policies.
Thank you very much. I admire you very much for all of the work that you do.
Merci, Madame McPherson. Thank you, Ms. McPherson. We now will continue to our final round for 2 minutes each, starting with Ms. Vanderbilt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to direct my question to the Equality Fund. I know that you have a unique kind of a mechanism, particularly because of how directly you support women on the ground, activists, human rights defenders around the world. And so that gives you a very unique perspective, but also intel that's coming back to you. One of the things that you mentioned in your remarks is about our human rights defender stream. And I'm very proud that that came out of a recommendation, a report from this committee to have a stream of immigration specifically for human rights defenders. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how you would see that being expanded, not just in numbers. And I would be so bold as to say I'd go even further than the numbers you were suggesting. I think we need to do this at scale, but also in the mechanism, because we know that often human rights defenders, they're not like other asylum seekers. They want to stay in their country. They want to return the moment that it's safe, but they also have more urgency when they need to get out. They need to get out now. So is there a mechanism that you would see where, rather than being part of the asylum program, this would be a separate stream that would specifically target human rights defenders, and what would that look like?
Thank
You
you.
have about 40
thank you so much for your question. What we hear from human rights defenders is that they need that protection quickly when they need to leave, but that in itself is not sustainable. So a mechanism, as we recommended, would also look at what supports are in place when those human rights defenders are part of, in the case of Iran, for example, the diaspora. Can they continue doing their human rights defense? Can they continue to be in connection with others doing this work? If those supports are not in place, if that networking is not happening, then those who wanted them silenced and out of the country in the first place almost win, right?
Thank you.
And so that's really important to take into account.
Thank you. And we're going to continue to our next round with Mr. Abultayeb for 2 minutes, please.
Thanks for the witness. We got 2 minutes. Mr. Sharrouz, thanks for appearing among the others. The world is changing around us quite a bit, and everything that we believe in is happening now, and we never thought it would happen, especially when it comes to Iran, to Afghanistan, and other places, China, for example, and so forth. Are we up to the task in Canada to deal with such a human rights violation, especially against women and girls? And what can we do? Like, if we were to set the priorities, what can we do to make sure that we will be effective rather than just continue to make those studies and, without any action plan that we really know that is going to make a difference? Thank you.
Excellent question, sir. I think there is a lot that we can do, and we are a middle power, but we're an important one, and we have played this role before. And I alluded to the really important role that Canada played with respect to apartheid in South Africa. I think we ought to adopt the same plays from the same playbook. Iran's apartheid regime needs to be isolated diplomatically, and we also need to provide maximum support to Iranian people to help overthrow the regime. That means many things. It means that we have to use our relationships with our like-minded countries, with allies, to bring pressure to bear on the Iranian regime. It means we must, here in Canada, list the IRGC as a terror group, carving out people that were forced to serve as conscripts. We have to. There was just a minute ago discussion about the human rights defenders stream. We really do need to open our doors to human rights defenders that are languishing. Just in the last few days, I've been hearing many really troubling stories from human rights defenders that are stranded in Turkey and Iraq that want to come to this country. These are actual, tangible ways that we can help the revolution in Iran.
Yeah, there is no unified front as far as the Western world and Iran, and Canada is not at the same level as our allies. Any of the witnesses would like to comment on that?
A very brief remark.
Yeah, if I may quickly say, there was no unified front against apartheid South Africa either. It was then Prime Minister Mulroney who unified the West against apartheid South Africa. It really will take that kind of moral leadership for Canada to, again, be at the forefront of this battle against apartheid.
Thank you. And we're going to continue on avec Monsieur Brunel de Sepp, I'll ask all the witnesses just to keep your earpieces, and there's a slight delay in translation. It might be 5 to 10 seconds, so just keep that in mind as you're listening in. On va continuer.
So we'll move on with Mr. Brunel du Sepp. You have 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noted the analogy raised by Mr. Charouz with respect to what happened with apartheid under Brian Mulroney and following representations from Jean Doré, the mayor of Montreal. The leadership had called the Americans and the Brits, and several were reluctant. And somehow, at the time, he had shown leadership. And Nelson Mandela's first trip abroad was to Canada in recognition for that. Now, with respect to the issue of leadership, it is exactly this same issue. It's apartheid in Afghanistan, in Iran, and also in Saudi. And what we've seen recently is that the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran seems to be improving. Is that not, in a way, a barrier to Canada getting involved now that there is this warming of relations between these two countries? That actually adds a very complex variable to what we're experiencing now. Would you agree?
Seconds.
Was that question directed at me, sir?
Yeah. Oui.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. It is that warming relationship is a barrier. MPSSI alluded to it as well. Anything that normalizes Iran's regime and creates greater alliances for it in the region is a barrier for Canada, and it's an obstacle for Iran's revolutionaries and human rights defenders. But as I told MPSSI, and I wish to reiterate here, our role in Canada is to stay focused on the things that matter, and here the rights of women and girls matter a great deal. It doesn't matter if Iran is normalizing its relationship with another authoritarian state and that deal is brokered by yet another authoritarian state in China. Our focus should remain on promoting the rights of women and girls. We should not get distracted by these regional alliances that are forming.
Merci, thank you. Pour la dernière round.
Last round.
Ms. McPherson.
Merci infiniment à tous les témoins.
Thank you to all the witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to all the witnesses. Mr. Charouz, I have one very quick question for you. Many of the members of all parties have sponsored women activists or protesters who are in prison in Iran. Is that an effective strategy? Is there other strategies similar to that Canada can use?
Thank you for that question. It is a very effective strategy. An organization I refer to, the Iranian Justice Collective, we've been keeping a database of this. And what we've found is that the prisoners that have had sponsorship are actually more likely to be released. And I've been doing this human rights work focused on Iran for many, many years. And what prisoners or former prisoners always tell me is that their situation always improves. Their interrogators treat them a little bit better, and they're more likely to be released when there are well-known Western figures, Western politicians, celebrities, and so on, willing to speak out for them and keep their issue alive. The Iranian regime ignores, a lot of human rights obligations that they have, but they do care a great deal about what's being said about them in the West. And so steps like that are incredibly effective, and I would urge you and all your colleagues to continue with this really important work.
Well, I had the great joy of the person that I had sponsored, the first young woman I'd sponsored being released, and it was a very, very nice day to hear that news. So
I thank you.
I'll share that with our colleagues.
It's really the difference between life and death for a lot of people. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have 30 seconds.
Oh, I still have 30 seconds? Goodness. Well, I guess I thought that I would only get 1 second, so that's all I have. I guess what I would do is just give this back to Ms. Gonzalez-Michon. If there's anything last statement you'd like to make with regards to what Canada can do to aid women in Afghanistan, in Iran, and in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would really pick up on your last point and emphasize that these Voices at Risk guidelines that we have to support human rights defenders all around the world precisely have, for example, guidance to Canadian missions to attend trials of human rights defenders, hearings, visit human rights defenders in prison. And so just validating that what works in Iran also works in other places. And can we please assess how those guidelines are working, how they're being used, what we're learning from them as a way to improve what Canada is doing.
So a recommendation for this committee could be, in fact, that we as a committee bring forward sponsorship or raise the plight of certain individuals.
Yes or no on that? Yes, we heard. Thank you.
Thanks.
So let us, we want to thank all the witnesses for being here today, for coming in person and by Zoom. Ms. Hoodfar, thank you. And Mr. Charose and Ms. Manchon, thank you for being here today. We thank you for your testimony, your advocacy, and raising the profile of these issues to here and us. Thanks for being here. We're going to suspend a moment while our next witnesses come on in.
Point of order, Mr.
We
Chair.
have Mr. Versen before that. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to mute your mic there. Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a point of order or point of privilege, but one of the things that's interesting about our committee that's different from other committees is that we have not passed a motion that allows our whip staff, each party's whip staff, to gain access to the digital binders. And so I'm just wondering if we can get the consent of our committee to allow our whip staff access to the digital binders. So I have a motion, if we want to go in that direction, that the clerk of the committee be authorized to grant access to the committee digital binders to the offices of the whips of each recognized party. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Did we receive notice of this? We did not receive notice of this, so please give notice, unless we'll give leave for this to be voted on right now, correct?
You can have unanimous consent to vote it now.
Is there unanimous consent for this? There isn't in the room.
Oh.
Okay. So what's the procedure here?
There's no unanimous consent.
No.
I'll move a motion at a later date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Versen. And I encourage the members to speak with each other, given that there's not unanimous consent. And as you mentioned, Mr. Versen, this is a committee that operates differently with unanimous consent. So we are going to have conversation around that if possible. Let us now, we're going to suspend a moment while we're going to go into the second panel. Do I tap this thing? going back now into our second panel, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here in person and by Zoom. We have from Amnesty International Canada, Kedi, I apologize about last name pronunciation, Nivia Bandi, from Secretary General. From Oxfam Canada, Lauren Raven, Executive Director by Zoom, and also Leah Pelletier-Marcotte from Oxfam Quebec, a policy analyst. We'll have 5 minutes introductory remarks from each of the two organizations. And we'll start with Amnesty for 5 minutes, please.
Wonderful, thank you. Just want to make sure my mic is on. Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the invitation to appear before the subcommittee. I'd like to start by noting how timely your study is. Decades of progress and hard-earned wins for women's rights are under attack across the globe, and it really feels like we are swimming against the tide. I know that this committee has heard extensively on the state of women's rights in Iran, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. And so I will focus my remarks on brief updates and recommendations for action. First, in Saudi Arabia, you may recall that the personal status law, which was passed just a year ago and was framed by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman as a step toward progress and equality, has just marked a year now. In reality, although the law did introduce some positive reforms, such as setting a minimum age for marriage, for instance, it really has codified some of the informal and the very problematic practices of the male guardianship system. The law fails to protect women from domestic violence, and it entrenches a system of gender-based discrimination in marriage, divorce, custody, and inheritance. It is therefore key for the government of Canada to press Saudi authorities to act on their CEDAW commitments, which they ratified in 2000, and to end the male guardianship system in full. Also crucial is ending the imposition of travel bans against women human rights defenders and releasing the women who are unjustly imprisoned for the peaceful expression of their support for women's rights. And this would include the release of women's rights activist Salma al-Shahab, who was sentenced last year to 34 years in prison based on tweets in support of human and women's rights. Canada, in partnership with its G7 allies, can and must sustain international pressure on the Saudi authorities to respect women's rights and freedoms. In Iran, the penal code, as you know, enables security and administrative bodies to arbitrarily arrest, detain, and punish women. To put this in real terms, the punishment for women's acts that are deemed offensive to public decency include 10 days to 2 months of imprisonment or 74 lashes under Article 638 of the Islamic Penal Code. Canada must condemn these laws and regulations that deny women access to public institutions. And here I mean hospitals, schools, government offices, and airports if they do not cover their hair, as well as the ongoing surveillance and harassment to implement the forced veiling laws. Also critical are independent investigations on the torture and ill treatment of Iranian women human rights defenders, and Canada should not be deceived by claims of disbanding the morality police, but instead call for immediate transformative change that will transition Iran to a political and legal system that respects women's basic human rights. And in Afghanistan, as you know, the situation is disastrous. In December last year alone, women were banned from attending university and from employment by local and foreign NGOs. These rules follow the ban on women to enter parks and gyms, to attend secondary schools, and to participate in sports. The Taliban have decimated the system of protection and support for those who are fleeing domestic violence. They've detained women and girls on minor violations, and we're now seeing a surge in the rates of child, early, and forced marriage. Last November, 3 prominent women human rights defenders were arrested with their colleagues for their peaceful activism. So Canada must call not only for the Taliban to urgently lift their restrictions on women and girls, but also for an end to their crackdown on anyone who dares to protest these constraints. Again, sustained international pressure is the only hope to reverse the stifling ban on human rights and women's rights. Mr. Chair, as tragic as the situation in these 3 countries is, I wish to note that the rise on attacks on women and gender rights is global. And I encourage you to investigate these trends as well as situations in other countries as well. Online violence and the spread of transnational, anti-feminist, anti-gender narratives are at an alarming high, with devastating impact on women, particularly here in Canada as well. And lastly, I'll just highlight the need to support women human rights defenders in peril, particularly when they arrive on Canadian soil, because existing systems are inadequate and we need practical solutions to support them. So I'll stop here now, and I'll be happy to expand on these further in the question period. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Navia Bandi, for that. And now we're going to continue to Oxfam for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting. Is there a lot of echo on the line? No, it's better. Thank you for inviting us at Oxfam to appear before the subcommittee. It's fantastic to be appearing with Ketty and the analysis of amnesty. My name is Lauren Ravone. I'm the Executive Director of Oxfam Canada, and I'm here with my colleague, Léa Pelletier-Marcotte from Oxfam Quebec. And we are both joining you virtually, unfortunately, but from the traditional territory of the Mohawk peoples, and are grateful to our host nation for the privilege of living on their lands. As I speak to you today, we know the world is experiencing a time of crisis. Extreme inequality, climate change, unprecedented food and energy price inflation that have all been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine are creating this perfect storm for the most vulnerable people around the world, and the majority of whom are women and girls. According to the UN, 339 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian aid, which is the largest number in history, and acute food insecurity is escalating, with 45 million people at risk of starvation. Now, all of these crises that we're facing have profound implications for women, from restricting their access to sexual and reproductive health services, exacerbating gender-based violence, increasing their unpaid care work. And the progress that we've made to achieve gender equality has been set back by generations. It's now estimated that will take close to 300 years to close the global gender gap. So, for example, in Yemen, where Saudi Arabia and other external actors have been fueling armed conflict for close to 8 years now, women's rights have faced setback after setback. We see that gender-based violence has increased by at least 66% since the beginning of the conflict. And we know that physical and emotional abuse and domestic violence are intrinsically linked to the deep economic crisis that households are experiencing, and that families are resorting to harmful coping strategies like child marriage to survive. The conflict in Yemen has created one of the worst displacement crises in the world. And 1 in 3 households that have been forced to flee are headed by women, which puts them at an increased risk of violence. And despite the critical role that Yemeni women have been playing to respond to the crisis, their political participation has declined sharply, especially since 2015. In fact, there are now no women in the cabinet of the recently formed Yemeni government, which is a sad first in over 20 years. Women are also facing risks of arbitrary detention and forced disappearance, and we know that many women activists and artists are currently jailed. In the north of Yemen, women are required by the authorities to be accompanied by a male guardian when traveling, and this restriction primarily targets female humanitarian workers, including our Oxfam colleagues and our colleagues in the Yemeni organizations we work with. This not only hampers our ability to deliver life-saving humanitarian aid, but it actually threatens the very existence of many women-led organizations in the country. Pressures on Yemeni authorities and regional actors by donor countries like Canada can be effective, and we saw this result in a relaxing of restrictions last year. But it's crucial that external pressure be paired with increased support to local civil society, including women's rights organizations. Now, looking beyond Yemen, as Ketty said, we're witnessing the rise of interconnected anti-rights movements around the world: anti-women, anti-trans, anti-abortion, anti-feminist, anti-democratic, anti-free press. Attacks on women's rights defenders and LGBTQ activists are on the rise around the world. Women politicians and journalists are being harassed, threatened, and attacked both in person and online. And this violence and intimidation is clearly a form of backlash against women's rights. It's intended to silence women and gender diverse people and keep them from holding positions of power. This is not only a threat to women's rights, it's a threat to democracy and to all of our freedoms. So I just want to end by sharing 5 of OXFAM's recommendations for the committee's consideration. First, the government should finally launch Canada's feminist foreign policy, speak up for women's rights in multilateral spaces, and use diplomatic channels to protect women's rights and women human rights defenders. Second, Canada should increase humanitarian aid to meet record needs, building up to $1.8 billion of new and additional funding by 2025, starting with $600 million increase in international assistance in this upcoming budget. Third, Global Affairs Canada should launch the second phase of the Women's Voice and Leadership Program. And in countries like Yemen, Canada should provide women-led organizations with flexible humanitarian funding and invest in strengthening their capacity to engage in peace building and conflict resolution. Fourth, Canada should implement a refugee protection and resettlement system that is based on equity and fair access for all and allows more people to seek safety in Canada more quickly and no matter where they're coming from. And finally, as discussed in the previous session, establish an emergency evacuation program and accelerated visa process for human rights defenders, and prioritizing those facing heightened risk, including women activists, journalists, and LGBTQ defenders. So I'm looking forward to questions. Thank you for the opportunity to appear on behalf of Oxfam.
Thank you, Ms. Revel. And we are going to now go into our first round. For 5 minutes, Mr. Abultayef.
Thanks for the witnesses for appearing today. If I may call you Kelly. There is chemical attacks on girls at schools in Iran that's happening as we speak. How do you read this? Do you have any details to share with us on how vast that is and what's behind it? And is there any hope that this is going to stop?
I cannot share further details now. All our analysis at Amnesty is based on first-hand research that we conduct, and so therefore we first go on the ground as much as possible or collect first-hand accounts before we can pronounce ourselves in order to be really factual. And so I'd be happy to report back to the committee on in these recent actions. What I would note, though, that this is part of really a war on women and girls in Iran overall. We've seen various forms of attacks that are targeted at silencing women and girls, particularly in this moment when we're seeing unprecedented protest and challenge of the Iranian authorities. And so I think it's important to read that as part of that desire to crush any dissent at the moment where the Iranian authorities feel very, very vulnerable. So I'll just pause here.
I know that we do have policies that we use to enhance and improve the conditions and the livelihood and the human rights of women. But it seems like the challenge we have here is that we're dealing with different agendas on different fronts. For example, what works for Iran and Afghanistan may not work for Saudi Arabia and Yemen. What works for any part of the world may not work in other part. Therefore, we are in need of more creative ways to look into different areas so we are most effective rather than broad on a policy that one size fits all. How do you see Canada's readiness in leading a way, at least in some areas, to make that improvement needed? And in specific now in Iran, which is, in my opinion, should be number one attention, and then Afghanistan, then other places.
Oh, that's a broad question, very much both a foreign policy question and a tactical question as well. I'd say that first and foremost, you are right in the sense that you can't apply the same strategy overall, but you do have to apply the same values and standards across the board. That needs to be really clarified. And when we speak up on human rights in Iran, we must do so elsewhere as well, wherever these rights are at risk. Now, I think it requires considerable investment in really identifying strategies that work per country, working with civil society, working with defenders who are on the ground, who understand the challenges in their countries better than anyone else, and to devise strategies that are informed rather than employing the same tactic across the board. It's clear from what we're seeing around the world is that these attacks are unique. They're also sophisticated. They're becoming more and more professional, and they need, Canada and other countries that are standing up for human rights to do that with as much capacity as well. So I hope that.
The question again, how ready we are in Canada to take a leadership, if not on all fronts, at least on some initiatives, to be able to be effective and to make a difference.
I think Canada has the potential to do that. It's a question of will, political will as well, but the potential is there, and the leadership is needed, certainly. There's a global vacuum of leadership on human rights, and there's a role that Canada can play.
Is your message, or was your message to the Canadian government, was there a specific message on the leadership? What are you doing to be able to lobby further and to push the government, or actually to direct the government into probably a better approach that is more effective?
It's the work that we do daily. We advise the Canadian government to take strategic approaches. I would add to that the world craves for a Canada that is bolder on human rights, more articulate, not afraid, and able to really uphold the rights of all across the globe. So really, I think I'd like to emphasize on that we need, if we're going to be credible on human rights, we have to do so across all countries and not necessarily prioritizing some over others or some human rights crises over others.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And now we're going to continue to our next round. Mr. Sidhu for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us here today to share your insights. It was International Women's Day a couple days ago, and so thank you for your work and your inspiration. I know my daughters are very inspired by the work you guys do. My question to you, we heard in your opening remarks, Secretary General, about the importance of protecting human rights defenders and the need to do more. We heard from Ms. Ravon as well. She had mentioned maybe expediting visa processing. And so Secretary General Navia Bandi, any thoughts in terms of what more or any further insights you can provide on what we can do?
Absolutely. So yes, women human rights defenders, when they are risking their lives to protect, human rights, justice, freedoms, find themselves in incredible danger. And these things often happen, within 24 hours or 48 hours. I'll give you the case of a human rights defender in Nicaragua just a couple of weeks ago when, over 200 Nicaraguans were stripped of their citizenship, and we needed to find a solution for her urgently. We needed to get her out of the country, and we needed the support of a country to do that. And here is where I think Canada falls short, and there's a lot of opportunity. So we do need, first and foremost, I'd say we need absolutely an emergency visa system that is specifically designed for human rights defenders at risk. Right now, there's a gap in our immigration system. You can leave, you can apply for a tourist visa, or you can come as part of a refugee stream. But if you're in the country and need to leave, you will be denied a visa precisely because you are considered to be a risk of not returning to the country. So you're penalized, and human rights defenders are penalized for their status. So we do need a stream for that. And some countries, particularly in Europe, have models that I think Canada can follow, including Ireland. So that's the first thing. But also once they get here, they need support. And so we need to be able to fund a program for activists at risk that enables them to have the assistance, and it could be in the form of fellowships or programs for activists at risk here in Canada that support them so they're able to continue their work while they're temporarily relocated. And then lastly, I would say that we need a Voices at Risk guideline equivalent for those who have left their countries and are here in exile. They're exiled in Canada. The Voices at Risk are very explicit for people who are outside, but once they've relocated and they've made it on Canadian soil, these women human rights defenders find themselves lost in the system, and we need clear guidelines to support them.
Thank you for that. And Ms. Ravon, I'll turn next to you. You had mentioned difficulties and challenges in many countries around the world. And really, I wanted to kind of hear more about the work your organization does in some of these countries, projects that you think stand out that need to be amplified. And so I'd like to give you a moment here to kind of talk about some of those programs, if you don't mind.
Thanks for the opportunity. And maybe if you don't mind, I would start also just by following up on what Ketty just said on human rights defenders. I think three things I wanted to add. One is this issue of having had to have left the country. That's a major barrier and something that we've seen with activists that we work with. So, many within a 24-hour crisis won't have any UNHCR referral to be applying for asylum. And so changing that is crucial. A second one is around kind of nurturing civil society in exile in Canada through supports. We know that WAGE and other government departments have built up more support for the women's movement in Canada over the years, and this is fantastic. But looking at exiled activists as part of an ecosystem of civil society in Canada is crucial, and it connects the dots between local civil society strengthening and our international development assistance. And then a third point I would say on that relates more to global affairs and global affairs funding. As Oxfam, we support women's rights organizations, feminist movements in many countries around the world, in part through programs like Women's Voice and Leadership, but also on areas like gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive rights, in countries from challenging countries from Yemen to Pakistan to Central America. But one gap that we've identified that I wanted to mention was the difficulty of funding activists in exile. So not only those that make it to Canada, but if you think of the context, for example, of Afghanistan, activists or Afghan politicians may have fled the border so they can be in neighboring countries, whether it's Pakistan or elsewhere. It's very hard to support those activists in exile through global affairs programs that are intended to build up human rights programs and women's rights organizations because of that fluidity of having gone elsewhere. And yet we know that those are the voices that keep hope alive for many people who are back in the country and that keep resistance when it's unsafe to be in the country. And these are the women and the activists who usually will then return to their country and be key leaders in democratic movements. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sidhu. And we're going to continue to our next round for 5 minutes avec Monsieur Brunel Duceppe.
Mr. Brunel Duceppe.
Keep your earpieces in if you need them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everyone for being here today on this important study. There's been a lot said about Yemen in your opening statements. Clearly, this is an area where there is an indirect war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I have a question that is in two parts. We know Canada is currently funding humanitarian aid in Yemen. Of course, we are aware that it's not enough. It's a small 0.42% of the average OECD involvement. There is, however, some funding from the government of Canada in Yemen. I'm wondering if that is in Yemen. I'm wondering if that is sufficient. If not, I'm wondering what measures should be taken in Yemen. My question is for Léa Pelletier-Marcotte. Thank you very much. I'll try to answer to the best of my abilities. The issue of Yemen is rather complex. I think what we have to remember is that it's not simply a matter of funding humanitarian aid in Yemen, which is perhaps insufficient, but it's important that there also be political leadership on this front. A number of us have mentioned it, and it also involves other actions, including measures to avoid actually further feeding the conflict in Yemen that has to do with some of this arms trade among those countries that are parties to this conflict. Also, the idea of having feminist policy, that foreign policy that would not only support organizations that advocate for women and women's rights, but also those that support women in a global sense, supporting women's leadership within peacemaking processes, ensuring that the policies that they work within are female-friendly, and also that they promote a legal system that would reinforce confidence in the country. So it's not only a matter of money or funding, it's also about our leadership, our voice, our influence within the United Nations, for instance, to influence in ways other than financially. Well, you just mentioned it. Isn't it a bit counterproductive to, on the one hand, provide humanitarian aid and, on the other hand, sell weapons to Saudi Arabia? Does that not seem contradictory? Indeed, those actions need to be consistent. When we were talking about leadership, I think we can say that there have been countries over the last few years who've stopped sending arms to parties to this conflict in Yemen by proxy. I think Oxfam Quebec is involved on the field on the ground in Yemen. Would it be possible to tell the committee, given that your experience out there in the field, what it means, what's happening for women's rights in Yemen, because you're actually there on the ground? Indeed, Oxfam Quebec, and in fact Oxfam in general, always works with its partners. It's not as though we just land somewhere and tell people what to do. We work with local partners. Oxfam Quebec has projects in Yemen among local communities, specifically for hygiene and access to drinking water, access to water and hygiene, as I've said. The conflict in Yemen is very complex. I won't get into the details of that, but indeed there are a number of challenges for women, specifically women working within these organizations that we're working with, these humanitarian aid workers and member organizations that are limited in their capacity. Why? Because of the Maham policy that involves the male guardianship. Canadian leadership, Western countries' leadership can help in some ways relaxing that policy. So there is this window within which some women can travel through some areas independently, but that's limited. But we see that we could make a difference, and we need to remember also that women were politically engaged, active for a long time, and since the beginning of this conflict, there's been a drop in that. It's important to ensure that the United Nations Resolution, Women's Peace and Security, be enforced so that women are fully a part of the negotiations and the peace process, because they're currently excluded from that. There needs to be leadership on that front. Thank you. I'm already done. Yes, unfortunately. Thank you, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe and Madame Pelletier-Marcotte.
On va continuer avec.
Let's move on with Ms. McPherson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here with us and sharing your expertise with us. I'm glad that my colleague, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe, asked about the arms being sent to Saudi Arabia. I think that's an exact indication of why we need a written down public feminist foreign policy. $118 million was sent of armored vehicles was sent to Saudi Arabia in January alone. It is the opposite of action on a feminist foreign policy. And one of the things that I want to make very, very clear is we often hear with regards to international development that there needs to be more support from Canadians. I can tell you that there is huge support to stop sending arms to Saudi Arabia across Canada, and yet the Canadian government doesn't act on that. So a big issue for me. So you can probably hear me being quite frustrated in my language. Ms. Navya Bandi, you talked a little bit about how Canada cannot be credible unless we apply human rights lenses equitably across the world. We can't pick and choose. Could you talk about some of the places where you have seen that Canada has not done that, where we have not stood up for human rights when we should have?
Yes, and I think there's a degree of variation. So there are instances where we do speak up on human rights, but perhaps not with the same vigor that is needed. I would mention, countries even as recently as Peru, which just experienced a serious crisis. And here I would highlight sometimes the conflict between trade interests and human rights. And I think that's a very real conflict that needs to be resolved. And in terms of foreign policy, we need to be clear about what supersedes what, whether human rights actually supersede trade interest, and follow through. An example, so there's definitely in Latin America, there's a number of cases, Peru, but also Colombia and elsewhere. Another example would be the situation of women in Palestine, for instance, which we don't hear about sufficiently because of Canada's position in relationship to Israel. And you can uphold the rights of both Israeli women and Palestinian women. It is very much possible, and that's the lens that needs to be that needs to be used across the board. I'm a little bit concerned about the sort of rapprochement with India and with Modi's government as well. I think we need to be very mindful of what is happening in India as well, and ensure that our relationships do not, hinder our ability to speak up on human rights globally. Egypt as well is another case that needs very strong and sustained positions. And so as much as Canada has to, sort of maneuver its relationship with these countries, and in order to be able to be a credible partner and sometimes a trade partner, it will only benefit Canada to be consistent across the board on its policies on human rights. And I think there's a way to, and that's the beauty of diplomacy, there's a way of being able to do both, to uphold trade interests while also prioritizing human rights across the board.
Thank you for raising that issue. I mean, for me, it's always been a little bit like you can't have one without the other. You need, trade ultimately will fail. Those trade relationships will fail if we don't have good diplomacy, if we don't have good development relationships with other countries. I've framed it sometimes as the dessert you get when you actually do the hard work of development, human rights support, and diplomacy. Ms. Ravon, I have a question for you as well. You talked about the need for Canada to invest more in humanitarian aid. And you won't be surprised to hear me saying that I agree. Our ODA is woefully low in Canada. It's embarrassing when I am in the international sphere to have to say that we are still at 0.3% for ODA. But I also would like you to talk a little bit about how that money should be spent, because it's not just increasing the amount of money, it's ensuring that it is being done properly and that it is going to the right organizations. Could you share your thoughts on that?
In 30 seconds.
Thank you for the question. A couple of things. One, the way we spend our money is just as important as how much we spend. And we need to be in line in the way we spend money with the Feminist International Assistance Policy. So we can't support feminist programming in ways that are very rigid, that transfer risk onto local partners, that are compliance obsessed, that are unflexible. And so there's a lot that can be done with the current budget to move our international aid funding to ways that are more flexible, and not only that allow organizations to adapt to changing contexts, but that enable organizations to adapt from long-term development programs to emergency response when there's humanitarian disasters.
Great, thank you. We're going to continue now for quick 4-minute rounds with Ms. Vanderbilt, please, for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I really want to thank our witnesses. I think there's a lot of information here that we can put into our recommendations, largely because of your direct connections with human rights defenders and women human rights activists. And I was very interested, Ms. Nivea Bandi, when you talked about these sophisticated transnational anti-feminist narratives. And also, I do believe, Ms. Ravon, you mentioned that the backlash against women's rights is interconnected. And we know that this is something that is happening globally, and that means Canada's not immune. So human rights defenders, and I'd like to direct this question first to Ms. Nivea Bandi, human rights defenders, once they get here, you spoke in your remarks about some of the needs that they have, but I wonder, in your opening remarks, you touched on the need for protection. And the threats that they continue to face once they're here. And I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit about that, and then I'll ask Ms. Ravon to comment as well.
Yes, so very quickly, I think there's work to be done to study further the rise of anti-rights, anti-gender, and anti-feminist narratives. They are indeed transnational, and they are interconnected. Just yesterday, I just came back from Halifax with a roundtable with other scholars where they're actually studying exactly what these trends look like, and they are moving from country to country. It's more networks that are rising. It's a mix of both, a denial of their human rights framework and an emphasis on individual rights that we're seeing rising across, primarily in Europe, but also in North America and in various other countries as well. When it comes to one of the most effective way for them to spread is through digital platforms and social media in particular. And this is why the movement is becoming transnational. And one of the major threats for defenders who are here in Canada comes through these platforms. So the levels of online violence that these human rights defenders in Canada are facing, as I said, is alarming. They receive threats. But beyond the online piece, they also receive physical threats. Some of them have reported, particularly those from China, have reported receiving calls, being followed, being overt surveillance from their governments and from actors that are close to their governments and who have presence here on Canadian soil. So I would really want to highlight the need to better support women from online violence. We've just seen that the Governor General herself, he receives these levels of violence. Women journalists in particular are at risk here in Canada, and so are a variety of other women human rights defenders. So there's an emboldening of the anti-gender, anti-feminist, and anti-rights movement. It is spreading, it's organized, it's sophisticated, it is resourced. And so it needs an adequate response from the Canadian government. And I'm quite concerned about where we're going to be in 5 years if we don't take concrete action today. So I'll just stop here now and give Lauren an opportunity to respond as well.
Within 30 seconds.
Thanks, Ketty. I totally agree. And I think we need to be aware that attacks against the most marginalized communities and human rights defenders is usually a canary in the coal mine that's indicating a broader crackdown on democratic space, on civic space. So right now, for example, huge attacks on trans communities and LGBTQ organizing and the organizing of trans women in particular. The attacks that we see on them is a sign of what's to come in terms of broader attacks on women's rights, on human rights, on civic space. And so seeing these as kind of isolated incidents is dangerous, not only for their rights, but also for the health of our democracies. And I just want to say this week alone, around International Women's Day, we've seen huge attacks, tens of thousands of people attacking one of our Oxfam Canada board members, an incredible trans woman activist. And this is a sign that is incredibly concerning because it's also happening here in Canada.
Thank you. We're going to now continue to the next round. For 4 minutes, Mr. Versen, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. This is an important topic to be discussing. One of the witnesses was talking about Yemen. I'm just wondering, given that they're not one of the countries listed in this study, how that's connected to either Iran or Saudi Arabia. I'm sure there are. I'm just wondering how they...
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président. Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order. Just remind my colleague that the study has to do with the rights and freedoms of women globally and of women in Afghanistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia.
Pour ça. Et ça, c'est une très important.
That's an important observation.
Obviously, there is a translation problem because I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be talking about Yemen. I'm just wondering if the witness can clarify. I am aware, but for the general public, what the interplay between the countries we have listed in our study and the situation that's happening in Yemen.
Yes, I will clarify. The topic of the was not limited in terms of how it was phrased. It was the decline of rights of women worldwide, including in Iran, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. And as we knew, many witnesses would talk about these other countries. We chose to focus on one country in the same region that was also affected, and that covered all of the other areas mentioned, including involvement of women in peace building, cyber intimidation, and involvement in politics. So we chose Yemen as a case study because we have boots on the ground there.
Yeah, no, I'm not concerned about you including Yemen. I'm just wondering if you can comment a little bit about like the interplays. I think particularly Iran and Saudi Arabia, how there's like an interesting interplays with Yemen, and if you can explain that a little bit better. I'm somewhat familiar with it, but I'm not sure if all of these things are interconnected, and I think I wanted to just get that a little more on the record. That interconnectivity, and perhaps how Canada can play in that, because sometimes I feel we isolate. Oh, this is a Yemen problem. Oh, this is an Afghanistan problem. Oh, this is Iran problem. Oh, this is a Saudi Arabia problem. What do you have a specific recommendation on how can Canada address the interplay?
Within a minute.
Thank you for the question. So the conflict in Yemen has been internationalized since 2015, and many consider it as a proxy conflict between different world powers, different governments backing different coalitions or parties to the Yemen conflict. So of course, there is an interplay there, especially with Iran and Saudi Arabia. As I mentioned earlier, everything that Canada does in terms of who financing, but also who are we supporting, especially in terms of arms trade, have a great impact on this humanitarian situation in Yemen and on the conflict itself. As the conflict progresses and just lasts, the humanitarian situation becomes dire, especially for women and girls. So it was a very, very opportune opportunity to address the topic in Yemen, seeing as it interrelates with these two countries that are specifically mentioned.
Thank you for that, Mr. Versen. We'll continue to the next round. Pour 4 minutes, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe.
4 minutes, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions out in left field, and there's no wrong answer here. I myself have not yet wrapped my mind around this. I do need your clarification on this. You know, it's been a year that we've been pushing the executive in the government to amend the criminal code so that organizations, humanitarian organizations, could do the work in Afghanistan. Bill C-41 came out yesterday, and the devil's in the details. I'm wondering if you have any insight on C-41, and do you have a first impression yourselves on this bill? I don't know who might be in the best position to answer that question.
Je peux répondre.
I can respond briefly. Thank you for the question. This is an important issue that is growing. Why? Because there's going to be an increasing number of conflicts in those countries we're trying to deliver humanitarian aid in. It's no exception, really. Oxfam a priori is very happy to see an evolution in that file. The devil is indeed in the details. It's an ongoing work. It's a good example of cooperation within civil society, international cooperation, and the government's openness to moving something ahead like this. So I'm not saying everything's settled, but we're happy to see some evolution. Listen, maybe you'll call us when to give us more information later. Again, another question in left field. You're saying it was important to go through diplomatic channels to improve a lot of women abroad. Now, again, there's no wrong or right answer here, but I need your clarification. We have no embassy in Saudi Arabia. We've cut off those diplomatic ties. Is there more for or against? Is it more positive or negative to have no embassy there? If we want to fight for women in Saudi and provide consular services, is it not better to have an embassy there, or am I completely wrong on this one? I would have a hard time commenting specifically as to the advantage of an embassy, but I'd like to get back to what I was saying earlier as to the relationships with communities in exile to gain information, and those relationships with communities within countries. Canada has a role to play in supporting advocates once they're outside, even once they're beyond the border. Like, for instance, in Central America, you might have activists that in Costa Rica, for instance, who do work from there. We don't yet have the mechanisms in place to support and communicate with these activists in exile. I would encourage Global Affairs to look at the ways in which it can develop programs beyond the borders, because most programs, the way they work, are specific to a country. There is a bilateral agreement, long-term programs, and there's not that flexibility in place. It's a way to support these movements, but also to have some intelligence on what's happening within these countries through these groups. Thank you very much. Do I still have time, Mr. Chair? Okay, so we saw what happened with former Afghan parliamentarians. We're a small group that have been fighting for this, so that this list of women, for these women on the list, unfortunately, we've lost one of these women. Through federal programs, we supported Afghan women's leadership so that they could take their place, rightful place in. Do we not have now a duty, now that we've helped them emancipate, now that men have taken hold of that country? Do we not have a duty in this regard? Absolutely. And when it comes to Afghanistan, what we're seeing is that promises were made, but not much when it comes to supporting these people in exile. These people not only helped their own country in this regard, but also worked with Canada when it comes to democracy and human rights. We haven't done enough, certainly. Aside from women in politics, myself, Leah, colleagues from Oxfam in Afghanistan are very high, very much at risk. We're unable to access these programs. Some are still in Afghanistan. Some have made it across to Pakistan and still have no support from Canada at this point.
Okay,
Donc, le temps est échoué.
Your time is up. Thank you very much.
Continue now for 4 minutes with Ms. McPherson, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's always a challenge to go after Mr. Brunel Doucette because I have the exact same questions as him often. I would like to just get a little bit more information about the response that people have to the new humanitarian carve-out. Obviously, many of us within the House of Commons were happy to see it come forward. We've been pushing for this for 18 months. But yesterday we did hear from some organizations that do not think this is sufficient. It comes onto a bit of a bigger conversation that I want to have, and perhaps I'll ask each of you to comment on this. But the idea that we don't have a diplomatic relationship with Iran. We don't have, obviously, a diplomatic relationship with the Taliban. We do want to support women in those countries. I get your point, Ms. Ravon, that we want to make sure that we are supporting them outside of the country and to get them to safety. But that role that Canada can play with regards to diplomacy, I don't want to be in a situation where we have to wait 18 months for a humanitarian carve-out in another circumstance. What can we do now? What needed to be done? What better, I guess, with regards to the humanitarian carve-out? And what does Canada's role with regards to diplomacy look like? Perhaps I could start with you, Ms. Nivia Bandi.
I might actually let Oxfam respond because they're much more in the depth of the humanitarian work. And then I can comment on what Canada can do when it comes to the multilateral systems and organizations.
Okay.
I mean, on the way Canada basically funds programming, whether it's humanitarian development, needs a major shift and rethink, because it's not only about carving out exceptions in certain conflict situations. It's that our aid is so compartmentalized. And so I'll give you one example. We've received money from the Canadian government to support building the capacity of women's rights organizations in Pakistan. Fantastic work, much needed work. But then we haven't had the flexibility to use those funds to support those same women's rights organizations to respond to the flooding in Pakistan that happened last fall. So to be able to shift, so to say, we're building up capacity, but then capacity is built and then we can't use the same funds when circumstances change. And this goes for humanitarian response, for conflict. And so it's rethinking, the dividing lines between peace building funds, humanitarian response funds, long-term development funding, democratic institution strengthening. The world doesn't work in those boxes, certainly never has, but definitely isn't now. And so rethinking channels of funding that allow for adaptive programming.
Et si je peux me permettre juste une petite mention aussi, c'est aussi.
If I can add this, even if we don't have genuine diplomatic relationships, it would be to use our weight within international fora like the United Nations to do our work and encourage other countries to change their attitudes.
Excellent point. Hetty, could I pass it to you?
Yes, I was going to comment on the same. So in terms of how to exercise pressure, I think international multilateral organizations, particularly the United Nations, the Human Rights Council, and various other forums are really critical spaces where to make Canada's voice heard, but also to build alliances with other countries and to build, and I really think that that's where Canada has an opportunity to really create groups and allyship around human rights priorities and to be able to advance and counter this anti-right movement that is coming from particular countries and that is infiltrating these multilateral organizations. We hear that it's becoming increasingly difficult to even have gender-based language in those multilateral institutions. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to push back on the pushback, and I think really there's an opportunity for Canada to do more there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. And that concludes our time for the second panel. We have very brief business afterwards, but I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here. From Amnesty, Ms. Ketty, Nivea Bandi. From Oxfam Canada, Ms. Ravin, and from de Oxfam Québec, Madame Pelletier-Marcotte. Merci d'être ici aujourd'hui. Thank you for being with us by Zoom and in person. Now we're going to continue very briefly just to, first off, the next meeting on the 24th of March is going to be cancelled because of a House order.
Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone.
Related to Biden's address, President Biden's address. So our next meeting will not be happening, unfortunately, on that date. The one on the 31st at the end of this month, we will be looking at the report on Haiti and also giving drafting instructions around this study, which just concluded on women in Afghanistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. So I ask that, please, for the members, we went last time through the recommendations on Haiti. Please go through the rest of the text. Let's get that concluded for next meeting so we can continue to what we set on the agenda. At the same time, I'd ask that, given that there's a difference of opinion in the room and we have always worked on consensus, that there be conversation around what was brought forth by Mr. Viersen on this today, which represents an important change in the way how our committee operates. Now, next item is just an announcement. Madame Clerk will send out information to all the members around the Interparliamentary Union and the Universal Periodic Review. There will be a meeting that everyone's invited to on Thursday, March 23rd at 10 a.m., correct? We'll be sending out an email to everyone on that point. You're invited to be there. It's not obligatory. I'll take you in a moment, Mr. Versen. Just finally, let us pass the budget for the witnesses that appeared last time around Tibet. Everyone received that. C'est une demande pour...
This is a request for $7,225.
Good with this? We have Manny putting up his hand. And everyone else. So we're good with that. Thank you. We just for everybody's awareness, we have a second meeting on Tibet with respect to the residential schools that we discussed and looked at last time. The next set of witnesses, which will be in the next month, in April, will be experts. This is all for today. Some of the members in the room really need to leave. And we will now adjourn. Thank you. Mr. Versen, yes? You're holding your friend back, though. Go ahead, please.
You did say. Yeah,
yes,
that's
you're
fine.
correct. You're right. Go ahead.
I just was wondering, I seem to have caused some controversy with my motion, and you say this is something to do with this committee operates differently. I'm aware of some of the differences that this is. Is it not the norm that WHIP staff get access to the binders? Is that something that's been different in the past?
So in this committee, that's never happened before, and it'll be a new precedent through what you're suggesting. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a significant turnover in WHIP staff. I was not aware that that's not been the case in this committee. I'll continue to have discussions.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, and I think we all agree to that. Thank you, though, for that, Mr. Versen. Yeah. I'm going to adjourn for the members in the room. Thank you, everybody. Stay well. Bonne fin de semaine.